This is JP Kuhlwein, principal at Ueber-Brands Consulting and co-author of the book Rethinking Prestige Branding: Secrets of the Ueber-Brands. And today I'm in front of the Highline Park here in New York City, and you might wonder, what does a park, and a public one at that, have to do with modern prestige branding? But as we will see, the park illustrates some of the very same principles that make modern premium brands, like the ones surrounding it by now and behind me here, be peerless, priceless, and desirable. So desirable that over 8 million people flock to this park every year from around the world. Like most Uber brands, the Highline also has a rich history and mythical creation story that is kept fresh and engaging by recounting and reinterpreting it, not only along the Highline, but there are plenty of discussions on the net, in books, and across all medias, social and other. From nature winning back an industrial wasteland, to a quirky, lonely neighbor discovering this elevated wonderland, to them uniting to fight Goliath, commercial interests and politicians to preserve it, and then finally a story of Phoenix not rising from the ashes but from some rusty bridges in the middle of Manhattan to become one of the most popular parks in the world. Making their design iconic and tell the brand story is of extreme importance to Uber-Brand designers, and that shows in some of the details. For example, it was a natural, organic choice to make the new access staircases, like the one behind me, of metal. But at the same time, that meant a loss of functionality because they ice over in winter and cannot be salted in order to be de-iced. That means the Highline Park has to close on some particularly icy, cold days. And that's the price you have to pay for a beautiful product to behold. Rails are an obvious design element that is being highlighted and celebrated by the Highline Park, like on the ground and in the guardrails here behind me, but also in the modern design elements like the concrete flooring that you see over my shoulder, as well as the park benches. And then there is the landscaping and plantings, of course, which are inspired by the wild growth that happened after the Highline was abandoned, but is really elevated with a designer's eye in order to allow us to appreciate it and engage with it even more. As is so often the case, what looks like casual artistic creative expression, or in this case, wild overgrowth, is actually hard brand design work. For example, some of the planters here along the Highline are heated in the winter in order for the roots not to freeze and the plants to die. Like a good Uber brand, the Highline Park celebrates and elevates its biggest assets, like the vistas across the entire Manhattan Island. Visitors are fascinated with the loud, bustling world and the heavy but intricate ironwork down here below, and the changing natural surface above. Are people standing on balconies looking down? Or are we on street level down here looking up at them as a framed part of the Highline? Are the visitors sitting up here on benches looking down at the city? Or is it the city looking up at the strange and ever-changing theater play that is happening up here on the Highline? And there's interactivity beyond the park structure in the art that is installed there as well. Another principle illustrated by the Highline is how important it is to understand your Uber target, the people who will support you, who will become your brand disciples. Early on, those were people from the arts, creative industries, as well as politicians. Some of them are inscribed behind me. Clinton, Mayor Bloomberg was very essential. Diane von Furstenberg and her husband were also early supporters. Her flagship boutique is still right next to the Highline. But then there were also groups like photographers taking beautiful pictures of this intriguing industrial natural landscape, and thus helping in the fight for its preservation. Today there is a Flickr website that unites some 2,000 of them having posted over 25,000 pictures. The simple but iconic logo behind me reflects the essence of the High Line. It was donated by another creative supporter of it, Paula Scher. And then there is the Uber target of the nature lover and neighbor. They are all volunteers. However, there are long waiting lines to become a member, and they proudly wear their High Line uniforms, longing to belong. While workers, artists, and the homeless might have once shared the space below the High Line, today it is a definitely hip audience that lives above it here in the Standard Hotel, or hangs out below it in the beer gardens, coffee shops that now are underneath the High Line or surrounded here in the meatpacking district. And here's a real rarity around the High Line. Some of the last meatpackers still operating in the area. This is what used to define this neighborhood, but obviously it has been hugely gentrified since the High Line has been transformed. You know, a brand has become a cultural icon when others, like the Whitney Museum of Art, decide to move down from Midtown and install themselves right next to it. Now, what about business, profits and growth, you might ask? And that's obviously where the High Line is a little bit of a different Ueber-Brands example. Nevertheless, it also illustrates how Ueber-Branding creates value. Just look at the billboard behind me and it shows you what's going on. Real estate prices along the High Line have literally exploded and now meet or exceed those along Central Park or other prime real estate in New York City. Many Starchitect projects have sprung up, like the one by Zaha Hadid behind me here, and you can imagine that those prices are no longer for those who can't afford living in other places in Midtown Manhattan. This humongous development that you see here is called Hudson Yards, the biggest development in New York. Billions of dollars worth of residential, office, and commercial development going up here. You need more proof that Ueber-Branding elevates your brand and creates value? Then head over to our blog at Ueber-Brands.com, and if you want to elevate your own brand to Ueber-Brand status, then write to us at info@Ueber-Brands.com. See you there.